I mean, I'll jump right into it. You're working with some wonderful actors. I've interviewed Daisy Ridley 3 times now for various movies. I'm such a fan. So seeing her in this, she's such a badass.
Mm.
So I was curious what it was like for you working with her on Annette, this very sort of unique character with tricks up her sleeve. I wonder, beyond what was on the page, as director, if there was more that you and her kind of worked on behind the scenes, whether it was, the haircut and other little nuances that kind of helped achieve her, you know, kind of persona.
It's a great question. I mean, yeah, it was a pleasure working with Daisy. She's very, 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 very inventive and very committed, and was just willing to go again. I think that was one thing we enjoyed together was, me dropping in a couple of steers and then going again, and a couple of steers and going again. So I suppose there was some sense of play on set within the time constraints we had. I mean, in terms of like the haircut, which I think is just wonderful, that was very much Daisy's choice and where she wanted to be. And I think it was a great choice. Very kind of, retrospectively, I was like, oh, yeah, that is very kind of Hitchcock, that style. That's very kind of iconic, noirish style. So it's very cool. And I think, in terms of other collaborations, Natalie Raw, who did the costumes, was a real key member of that conversation and takes Daisy's character Annette from a kind of suppressed, kind of diminished woman to someone who is sort of owning her power and sort of comes back to herself, both, in every way. And we express that, through the costume too. So I guess that's one area.
Yeah, 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 of course. That's very interesting. And yeah, you mentioned this sort of noirish. I was going to ask about, I saw this movie kind of billed as a neo-noir, which I agree with. I feel like I've been watching a lot of neo-noirs lately, which is great. It's great to see this resurgence. And I was curious, did you sort of find yourself watching any, whether classic noirs or other neo-noirs, recent ones, to help sort of get you in the framework for Magpie?
Yes, and like I'm really glad. It's interesting is when you set out to make a film of a certain genre, you hope that you deliver that. Like you do have to really keep your eye on that, because you can easily drift. And what I love, I suppose, about neo-noirs or noirs is that you've got like people behaving in morally very questionable ways, and also taking a normal person and pushing them to an extreme and seeing what they do. So I really, really like that. There's a lot of movies that do that that aren't noirs, but I mean, oddly, like Silence of the Lambs was quite a big reference for this, and perhaps more for the sort of subjective POV camera work, which John Demme was just the best at. And maybe it was just the sort of it's quite restrained, but then has quite a wild finale. So that was quite a big reference. And then we were watching stuff like, David Fincher's movie, like obviously Gone Girl, and those kind of like thrillers where you never really sure what's happening, but you're like something is cooking underneath. So those kind of like more domestic, oh, is Gone Girl domestic? Yes, I suppose it is. Kind of thrillers that are actor driven. So yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And yeah, of course, the subjective POV, I was going to ask about that. I thought it was a brilliant use in this. And yeah, Sounds of the Lambs. Now that you mention it, of course, that also used it very well. Was that, as director, were you planning on utilizing uh, that technique from the get-go? Or did, like, upon reading the script, were you like, ooh, I can definitely do this? Or did it sort of come late in the game, maybe? Or
Came like in pre-production, and it was really a question of how to make there's texting in this film, right?
yeah.
There's an affair that begins via text message, and I really wanted a way to like bring text messages to life, so that they weren't just like you weren't just doing loads of shots of phones. So that was the first kind of question of it. And then I was like, okay. And then I started to look. This is where Silence of the Lambs was really, really like wonderfully inspiring because you actually chart how he uses it. Firstly, how he introduces it to an audience, which is kind of like stepping in, really. The camera's kind of here, and then it kind of comes to here, and then it's very tight. So the eye line gets tighter. And Jodie Foster's character is kind of often, not looking down the barrel, right? So she's often kind of the subject of the shot. And then you see when he changes that with Hannibal, and by the end, she's kind of owning it. And that was a great thing because it shows a sort of character coming through power, if you see what I mean, in that way, and becoming the master of the shot. So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, it came about halfway through, I think, and then it was like, oh yeah, this will hold, I think. So I wouldn't force it on anything, but when it's there, I think it's really powerful.
Of course, yeah, yeah, it was great. And yeah, bringing the text to life. Yeah, I thought that was a wonderful way to do it. And then the title, of course, I'll be chatting with Tom, the writer, I think tomorrow. But was there conversations? Was Magpie just the intended title all along? And did you have thoughts on it? And I was curious, I have some guesses as to why it's called Magpie, but I'd love to hear more from you, as to
What you'll
uh,
get, what you'll get.
well, I mean, I also was worried I missed something because I watched this movie very closely. Then I'm like, oh crap. But then, I'm learning about the bird and the different, things it represents. And, sometimes it can represent like either a good omen or a bad omen about relationships. But yes, so I was going down the rabbit hole and, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, I hear you. I mean, it was always called Magpie, so that was very much Tom's title.
yeah,
And I think you'll have to check with him, but I think for him it was about being attracted to shiny things, so that Ben, in his kind of attraction to Alicia, is attracted to sort of a shiny new appealing thing that he thinks will just solve all of his problems. So I think that's probably the closest for this film, but it is kind of up for interpretation. And magpies are a very interesting bird with a very interesting history. So,
right.
listen, we could talk about it for an hour and everyone
Yeah.
would sleep. So let's not.
It's cool. It's also, that there's a Radiohead song, Morning Mr. Magpie. It's one of my favorites by them. It's anyways, but yeah, it's a great title. And yeah, I think this movie could definitely benefit from watching it again, even, you know, I was curious when you read the script, no spoilers, of course, but did you sort of see the big twist coming, or certain plot developments? Did you see any of that coming from the get-go?
I didn't at all. And like, it's obviously critical that you maintain that in the finished product, but I just felt the compulsion to keep reading. And I hope that tension, has been kind of faithfully translated and amped on the screen. But no, I didn't really. I think I was more drawn to like some of the themes in it about like, especially like escape fantasies and kind of putting all of your hopes and dreams onto this person outside of the unit who thinks just like, if I was with them, everything would be great.
Yeah.
uh, Frustration, and also Annette very much her kind of being suppressed by someone in a relationship and slowly over time realizing her worth and doing something about it to free herself. So I was kind of drawn to the characters really and some of the themes because and then when I got to the end, I was like, that was very unexpected.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I was like pumping my fist. I thought it was so badass. But I mean, it was a perfect, but I mean, the rest of the movie, I mean, that speaks to the whole, ensemble. I thought it was wonderful how it worked up to it.
Good, good. Oh, thank you. Well, I'm pleased.
Yeah. Do you and I know you spoke about, Silence of the Lambs and some of the influences, but do you have like just in general, do you have like a favorite like throwback noir movie, like outside of just in general, or something you've seen recently that's in sort of the noir space that
Mm. Well, I really love Cache, the Michael Haneke film called
oh
Hidden,
yeah.
which I think you would describe as a noir. I'm not really
Yeah.
sure. I think you would. That's like just a wonderful movie. Obviously, Chinatown stands as a kind of pretty solid noir in that genre. I'm trying to think, like, beyond that as well, like further back. Those are probably two quite strong ones. You
Yeah.
know, would you call like Phantom Thread kind of almost like a noir, like a kind of gothic-y noir? Maybe it's not, but it feels like there's morally ambivalent behavior happening in that movie. That's a great movie. My God.
Yeah, that one was great. Yeah. I had to write an essay in French about cachet when I was in college, so it brings me back. But yeah, that's a great one. I love Phantom Thread. Yeah, those are good ones. Do you looking ahead, I saw I think you're involved in a TV series directing. Is that something you're currently still working on?
I am in the grade for episode one, so it's a three-part 3 hour miniseries called Towards Zero. It's an Agatha Christie. It's for BBC and BritBox. We've got Anjelica Huston, Matthew Rhys, Oliver Jackson Cohen, Anjana Vasan, Clark Peters, a really great cast. And yeah, that has noirish elements too. I guess all murder mysteries have a little bit of that happening in the background. So yeah, that's the next project, which I'm super excited about.
Yeah, yeah, it's a wonderful cast. I mean, it's yeah, what's it like working with them? I mean, do they live up I mean, especially Anjelica Houston, I mean, such an icon. Is she kind of like what you've heard about her, and did she's like live up to the hype, or was it particularly daunting finally brushing shoulders with her?
I mean, for sure, it was daunting, but she is totally, totally delightful
Yeah.
and wonderful, wonderful, wonderful actress. And she was just completely on point. She's got a great character. It's called Lady Tressilian, who's this kind of quite fierce matriarch, but of course she brings this like amazing dignity and subtlety to it. But she's just so powerful. I mean, her mind and just her presence is just like she was wonderful. She was wonderful. So it was great. But obviously, it's very surreal. You're kind of stood there and you're like, that's Anjelica Huston stepping out of a car and she's coming to set and she's gonna sit in this bed and play this role. So yeah, I mean, to be honest, I feel like with any actor, I mean, obviously if they're a Hollywood icon and you've watched their movies all your life, there's an added element, but I just love actors, so I'm always kind of excited and
Yeah, I'd be the same way. That's great. I can't wait to see that. And in the meantime, congratulations again on Magpie. I can't wait for everyone else to see that. So
thank you
thank you
so much.
for yeah, thanks for taking the time to chat with me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. I'll see you soon, I hope.
Yes.